here. Thanks for organizing this talk on a topic which is very close to my heart. So, let me begin by telling you about the structure of this talk. It's fairly simple. I have prepared a lecture for this occasion, which I am going to read out, and this will take about 25 minutes or so. And following that, we can directly go into the question and answer session. I'll be very happy to take questions and further dilate on the topic. To begin with, I will give an introduction to Anushilan Tattva as expounded in Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's works such as Dharma Tattva and Anandamot, and also his other works like Krishna Charitra and some of his essays that he wrote in the 1880s. Anushilan Tattva, which can be translated as the system of cultivation or doctrine of cultivation, is a new articulation of the Hindu religion by Sahitya Samrat Rishi Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. In the text, this has been sometimes referred to as the doctrine or system of culture in English, but I am going to avoid this nomenclature and translation because sometimes the phrase doctrine of culture can refer to cultural relativism, which is a rather modern or postmodern doctrine and has nothing in common with Anushilan Tattva, which is the subject matter of our talk today. So, to avoid such confusion, I'm going to use phrases like doctrine or system of cultivation for translating Anushilan Tattva. Bankim Chandra systematically developed this Anushilan Tattva in his dialogic work titled Dharma Tattva. By dialogic, I mean structure, the format of this book is in the form of a dialogue, which has two characters. One of these is named Guru and the other is named Shishya, as simple as that. So this is a dialogue that is happening between the Guru and the Shishya. It's a philosophical discourse through which the tattva or the essence of dharma is being expounded, is being interpreted and explained. This was published in the form of a book in 1888, though a large portion of the work was already being published in the form of individual essays and articles in the Bengali magazine Nabojibon, which was edited by Akhoy Chandra Sarkar between the years 1884 and 1885. Bankim Chandra edited these essays and added some more material to them to bring it all out in the form of a single volume, which he titled Dharma Tattva Pratham Bhag Anushilan, or Dharma Tattva First Part, Part 1, Anushilan. This choice of title actually hints at Bankim's plan of publishing subsequent parts of this particular work, which never materialized, and eventually Bankim Chandra passed away in 1894 at a rather early age of 55. Now, interestingly, Bankim had offered some of the major tenets of this reformulation of the Hindu religion in his celebrated novel Anandamot, which incidentally features the national song of India, Vande Mataram. However, the exposition of Bankim's Anushilan Tattva was not limited to the two works, namely Dharma Tattva and Anandamot, that I have mentioned in the title of my talk here. In reality, this exposition extends to Bankim's other well-known works, the most prominent among them being the Krishna Charitra or Krishna Charitra, wherein he even mentions the basic framework of the Anushilan Tattva as represented by the main conclusions of Dharma Tattva. In addition to this, the Anushilan Tattva has been expounded in Bankim's partial translation of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita with his own commentary. So this was an unfinished translation, commentarial work by Bankim Chandra. And also his other essays like Devatattva o Hindu Dharma, Devtattva Hindu Dharma in Bengali, also includes some interpretation of what he describes as Anushilan Tattva that we find most particularly and systematically developed in the title Dharma Tattva. We find a lot of intertextual references in all of these texts that I have just mentioned here. Now, coming to Anushilam Tattva proper, what is Anushilam Tattva? If that question is asked, we have already stated that the Anushilam Tattva is a kind of reformulation or what can be said to be a new articulation of the Hindu religion or Sanatana Dharma. To understand this claim, we will look into the basic framework of the Anushilam Tattva, which consists of 7 main propositions. I will try to list them down one by one. Number 1, man has certain capacities or faculties. Bankim has termed these as vrittis. The cultivation of these capacities or faculties, their development, and ultimately their fulfillment is what makes us human. Okay, so these various vrittis, as Bankim calls them, are certain human capacities or human faculties, and one has to go on cultivating them in order to gradually develop and ultimately reach a kind of fulfillment for each of the vrittis. And this fulfillment is what makes us human beings in the first place. The second, this was the first proposition, and the second proposition in this framework of Anushilam Tattva is that in such development and fulfillment of the human faculties consist the dharma of man. So if a question is posed, what is the dharma of human beings, then it can be answered by simply repeating the first proposition of the Anushilam Tattva framework. The third proposition says that there is an optimum limit or extent to which each of these faculties, these human capacities, should be cultivated and not beyond. And these limits or extents are determined by the proportions at which they attain a perfect balance or harmony with each other. The fourth proposition goes on to say that this perfect balance or harmony is weal, W-E-A-L, weal, or in Bankim's own words, in Bangla, he has called it shuk or sukha. The fifth proposition of this framework of Anushilam Tattva says when each of these vrittis or human faculties are properly cultivated to their respective optimum limits, they are oriented Godwards, towards Ishvara. And such orientation is the right Anushilan or cultivation of a vritti. And that indeed is bhakti. This is the fifth proposition of the Anushilam Tattva framework. The sixth proposition says that God or Ishvara is immanent. That is to say that he is omnipresent, he is present in all beings, he or she or it, and hence love for all beings is a necessary part of bhakti. Without this sort of love for all beings, there can be no bhakti in God or Ishvara, there can be no humanity, no humanness, and no dharma ultimately. The final or the seventh proposition of the Anushilam Tattva says that this love includes the love for oneself, love for one's kith and kin, family and friends, love for one's country, Swadesh Priti, love for animals, and daya or mercy. Considering the human condition, this final proposition also goes on to say that love of country or Swadesh Priti, Swadesh Prem, stands out as the supreme among all these various kinds of affection. So these are the 7 propositions in which the whole of Anushilam Tattva, which is described and explained in a 100+ page book, in this 100+ page book called Dharma Tattva, it can be summarized through these 7 main propositions. Noteworthy things here is that the final verdict. So the noteworthy thing in these 7 propositions is that the final verdict on what is the supreme dharma for mankind Bankim gives the answer that it is Swadesh Priti or Swadesh Prem, love of one's own country, which is the highest or supreme among all kinds of affection and all kinds of dharma. So in Anandamot, we find that the novel opens with a rather short but cryptic prologue. Okay, and this is interesting to note that Anandamot is a novel which has always provided a lot of inspiration to our revolutionary nationalists and even the moderate nationalists, so to speak, and especially the song Vande Mataram, which ultimately was adopted as the national song of India by the Constituent Assembly in 1950 when we gave ourselves our constitution, the Constitution of India. And therefore, the fact that in Anushilan Tattva itself, Bankim proclaims that love of one's country is the supreme of all kinds of affection and dharma that human beings can aspire to have, shows us the organic relationship, the connection between Dharma Tattva and the Anushilan Tattva that has been expounded in it, and Anandamot, the novel. So, coming back to the discussion on Anandamot, let me tell you a little bit about the contents of Anandamot, and especially of the first part, the prologue. We find that this novel opens with a short but cryptic kind of a prologue, beginning with an apprehension inducing, very foreboding kind of poetic description of a dark, vast forest. The prologue closes with a brief exchange between two unnamed and unidentified human voices. This exchange between these two voices goes as follows, and I quote, "A little while later, the sound came again. Again the voice of man rang forth, troubling the hush. Shall the desire of my heart ever be fulfilled?" 3 times the wide sea of darkness was thus shaken. Then the answer came, "What is the stake put down?" The first voice replied, "I have staked my life and all its riches." The echo answered, "Life, it is a small thing which all can sacrifice." "What else is there? What more can I give?" This was the answer, "Thy soul's worship." Unquote. This portion, by the way, is taken from the English translation of Anandamot, which was done by Sri Aurobindo and his younger brother, Barindra Kumar Ghosh. The fact that they took the trouble of translating a Bengali novel is testimony to the great influence upon their generation exerted by this particular novel. Both of them are representative of that generation of Jugantar and Anushilan Samiti affiliated revolutionary patriots, nationalists, who were ready to offer themselves up to all kinds of endeavors that would free India from foreign rule, with little thought to personal inconvenience. It is interesting to note an official report, to be specific, the Rowlatt Committee report, that has to say something about the influence of this novel and of Bankim Chandra in general upon the generation of revolutionary nationalists. And I quote from the Rowlatt Committee report, "It will be remembered that in 1906 was published the pamphlet Bhavani Mandir." This was written by Sri Aurobindo, as a matter of fact, which set out the aims and objects of the revolutionaries. It was remarkable in more ways than one. The central idea as to a given religious order is taken from the well-known novel Anandamot of Bankim Chandra. It is a historical novel having for its setting the Sannyasi rebellion of 1774, when armed bands of sannyasis came into conflict with the East India Company and were suppressed after a temporary career of success. Unquote. To return to the subject matter of the prologue to Anandamot, we have mentioned already that it goes into a poetic reverie in describing the dense darkness of a forest that spans multiple paragraphs. This darkness is in fact symbolic of the condition of Bengal in particular and India in general in the second half of the 18th century, that is, late 1750s onwards and until 1774 in particular, when the Sannyasi rebellion occurred. When the British East India Company was beginning to gain some foothold in the political and economic scenarios of our country. Chaos was the order of the day. The Mughal rule was in the decline. The Muslim governors of the Mughal Emperor in Bengal had by then achieved a high degree of autonomy and were mismanaging the political and economic affairs of the Bengal province with impunity. The British East India Company had, of course, secured the Diwani or tax collecting rights from the Mughal Emperor in 1765. The lack of governance and religious fanaticism of the Muslim Nawabs of Bengal, on one hand, and the ruthless extraction of taxes by the British East India Company, on the other, resulted in a famine that wiped out an estimated 1/3 of the population of Bengal. This is known as Chiattorer Monnontor in Bangla, the famine of 1176 of the Bengali calendar, which corresponds to the Gregorian calendar years of 1769 and 1770. This was one of the primary impetuses behind the uprising known as Sannyasi Rebellion. You can find more details about the Sannyasi Rebellion in D.N. Lorenzen's work. We do not have the time nor the scope to dwell upon this particular subject of the Sannyasi Rebellion here, so we will return to the prologue of Anandamath once again. There, in that prologue, as we saw in the excerpts from Sri Aurobindo and Barindra Kumar Ghosh's English translation of the Bangla novel, the fulfillment of someone's heart's desire requires a stake. What is the stake put down, within quotations, was the question asked by an anonymous voice in the dark, foreboding forest. Life and all its riches were offered, as a matter of fact, but they were dismissed as inadequate. The final resolution of the question given in the prologue was, and I quote once again, "Thy soul's worship," unquote. Please note that although Sri Aurobindo and Barindra had used the phrase soul's worship, the original Bangla text actually mentions the word bhakti, that is bhakti. This is the crucial connection between the novel of Bankim, that is Anandamath, and his philosophical discourse in Dharmatattva or Dharmatattva. Let me explain this point in some detail because it is important in understanding the core of Bankim's Anushilan Tattva as expounded in Dharmatattva, Anandamath, and his other works. We have already seen that the Anushilan Tattva, which we have translated as the system or doctrine of cultivation, has 7 main propositions. Of these, the very first states that man has certain capacities or faculties, which Bankim calls vrittis. It is important to point out here that this term vritti is not to be confused with the term vritti as it is used or found in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra or other yoga related texts. We all know about the famous sutra, Yoga Shutta Vritti Nirodha. That term vritti, as it is used in the technical darshanika parlance, in the technical philosophical parlance, is not to be confused with how Bankim has used this word vritti in Dharmatattva, where he explains Anushilan Tattva. This is rather a very peculiar Bengali use of the Sanskrit word, which Bankim himself translates as faculty in his Dharmatattva. Anyway, the first among the 7 propositions of the basic framework of Anushilan Tattva further states that one has to cultivate these faculties which all human beings are born with. Through proper cultivation of such, these faculties will develop, and if one persists, then the faculties will ultimately find their fulfillment. This, the Anushilan Tattva declares, is what humanness or humanhood, the term that Bankim uses in his Bangla is manushyattva or manushyatva, consists in. And this is the dharma of man. The extent to which such gradual development and ultimately of each faculty, ultimately the fulfillment of each faculty is to be achieved, is determined by one condition and one condition only: whether all these faculties are in a perfect balance or harmony with each other. Such balanced or harmonious fulfillment of the human faculties is weal or sukha. Bankim admits, I think in another of his more celebrated works, that is Krishna Charitra, that it is rare indeed to come across such perfectly balanced fulfillment through optimum cultivation and development of the human faculties. He enumerates many such faculties, but highlights four principal ones: Shaririki, Jnanarjani, Karyakarini, and Chittaranjani. So let me explain what these are. Shaririki is that faculty that has to do with the development of the physique. It is somatic in nature, it has to do with the body. Jnanarjani is that faculty which helps us acquire knowledge from different sources, form concepts or ideas in our brain, and synthesize them and put them in a framework so as to make sense of various things, various information that we are bombarded with at all the time that we are awake, or even when we are dreaming. Then there is the faculty called Karyakarini. By this, what Bankim means is the faculty of endeavor or initiative, the drive, the will to execute something. It is the enterprising faculty of human beings through which they take initiatives to do something and see it through the end. Finally, Bankim gives us the faculty of Chittaranjani, which is called Chittaranjani. It is the aesthetic sense, aesthetic faculty of human beings that is indicated by this term. Now, as soon as he mentions these four main human faculties, in addition to some others, an objection is raised by the Shishya. The Guru is basically giving or listing these faculties, and the Shishya, who's the listener to this discourse and who's also the participant in this discourse, asks questions, raises objections. The objection that the Shishya raises at this point, when the various human faculties are enumerated by the Guru, is this: whether such an ideal is attainable at all. An ideal human being or an ideal being where all the human faculties have been cultivated, developed, and ultimately fulfilled. And also where all these faculties are in harmony, are in perfect balance with each other. If such kind of a being is at all possible to come across. The objection is acknowledged by the Guru and is also resolved. He resolves this objection by saying that God or Ishvara is the only example of such an ideal. However, it is difficult for man, he admits, to comprehend the infinite nature and qualities of Ishvara at first, when he has started his sadhana or upasana, when he has started his worship of Ishvara and his journey into a religious life. Therefore, one should make those human lives as the ideal of Anushilan or cultivation, who have incorporated greater parts of this ideal. That is, those who are considered already as Ishvara incarnated in the human form. Here we see that Bankim has given new articulation, a reformulation of the Tattva of Avatara. Bankim here gives examples, firstly, of Buddha and Christ, who are the founders and expounders of world religions. He actually gives examples of four classes of beings. The first of such classes is Buddha or Christ. Figures like Buddha or Christ who have founded great religions on earth, who have expounded upon those religions. And then he talks about the other class of beings who are called rishis, and he enumerates people like Janaka, Narada, Vasishtha. You will see that they are different kinds of rishis. Janaka is called Rajarshi, who's rishi and raja. Narada is called Devarshi, who's a rishi among the devas, among the gods with a small g. And Vasishtha, who's a Brahmarshi, who's a rishi among those who have attained the highest knowledge or Brahman. This is the second class of beings that Bankim refers to. Then the third one includes figures like Sri Rama, Yudhishthira, Arjuna, Lakshmana, and Devavrata Bhishma, who are the greatest Kshatriyas, who are also kings and philosophers at the same time, who have reached the epitome of political power and are yet detached. They hold the scepters in their hand, and at the same time, they teach the highest dharmic ideals. And ultimately, the final class of people, and actually there is only one who belongs in this class, as mentioned by Bankim, is Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna, as he is found in Mahabharata principally. Through his Krishna Charitra, Bankim establishes the historicity of Sri Krishna as a key personage in the Mahabharata milieu, who had achieved the greatest harmony and fulfillment of all human faculties, and thus he justifies why Hindus worship him or have worshipped him through the centuries as Ishvara, as God. In the fifth and sixth propositions of the Anushilan Tattva, if you remember, orienting the development and fulfillment of human faculties Godwards towards Ishvara has been described by Bankim as Anushilan proper, as cultivation proper, a state which he has called Bhakti. Thus, Bankim establishes that Bhakti in Ishvara or God, which is the faculty, which is the practice of love, inclusive of love in all beings, is the culmination of the cultivation or Anushilan. It is for this reason that we see in the prologue to Anandamath an emphasis on Bhakti. If you remember that quotation from the translation of Sri Aurobindo and Baridra Kumar Ghosh, we see that not one's wealth, not even one's life is adequate for the fulfillment of the person who's asking the question whether my heart's desire will be fulfilled or not. And if you go on to read the novel, Anandamath, you will see that that desire of the voiceless one was to free Bharat Mata, that is India, from foreign rule. That was the heart's desire with which this person, this voice, had set forth. We will get to know in the novel who this person was, who this voice belonged to. I'm not going into the details of that. You can read the novel and enjoy it for yourself. But the point to be noted here is that not even wealth, not one's entire life are enough for the attainment of such a great ideal, such a great desire, that of freeing one's country from foreign rule. The answer that was given to this unnamed voice by another unnamed voice is that you have to put your bhakti at stake. You have to offer your bhakti. And through very meticulous perusal of Dharma Tattva, Bankim's philosophical discourse in Dharma Tattva, where he gives the Anushilan Tattva, the basic framework of which was used by revolutionary nationalists to create other frameworks. As we have already mentioned, Sri Aurobindo's Bhavani Mandir, which takes a lot of inspiration from both Anandamath as well as the Anushilan Tattva as explained, interpreted in Bankim's Dharma Tattva. We will see that Bhakti in Ishvara, which is inclusive of all kinds of love, love in all beings, love for oneself, love for one's family and friends, love for animals, love for lesser beings, and ultimately love for one's own country. Swadesh Prem, Swadesh Preeti is the word that has been used by Bankim in Dharma Tattva while explaining Anushilan Tattva. So that is the link between Anandamath and Anushilan Tattva, and is also the ultimate message which inspired the revolutionary nationalists of our country, especially from the years 1905 down to 1930s, late 1930s, and ultimately in the endeavor of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So throughout this era, especially in Bengal, this era is known as Agni Jug, or the fiery age, if I may use that sort of a translation of the Bangla name of that era, Agni Jug, Agni Yuga in Hindi or Sanskrit maybe. We see that Anandamath and Bankim's Anushilan Tattva have exerted a very crucial influence upon the psyche, upon the symbols, upon the language and tactics, even strategy of the revolutionary nationalists. We even see the names of organizations based on the idea of Anushilan Tattva, like Anushilan Samiti, which was a key revolutionary organization based in Kolkata and Dhaka, and also other organizations like Jugantar Dal, which was also closely linked with Barindra Kumar Ghosh, Sri Aurobindo. Before Sri Aurobindo became Sri Aurobindo, he was Aurobindo Ghosh at that time. So all these people had drawn their influence, drawn their inspiration, drawn their symbols and words through which they articulated their doctrine of revolutionary nationalism are to be found in Bankim's works primarily. This is where I will stop and invite questions. If you have any, I will be very happy to answer them. And thus we can further this discussion. Thank you.
I'm very interested in the Sri Aurobindo's translations of a few passages. If you could pick up a few more passages which have been translated by him.
Certainly. I would love to. So I am reading from Anandamath Prologue as translated into English by Sri Aurobindo and his brother Barindra Kumar Ghosh. And I quote, "A wide, interminable forest. Most of the trees are shawls, but other kinds are not wanting. Treetop mingling with treetop, foliage melting into foliage, the interminable lines progress without crevice, without gap, without even a way for the light to enter. League after league, and again league after league, the boundless ocean of leaves advances, tossing wave upon wave in the wind. Underneath, thick darkness. Even at midday, the light is dim and uncertain, a seat of terrific gloom. There the foot of man never treads. There, except the illimitable rustle of the leaves and the cry of wild beasts and birds, no sound is heard. In this interminable, impenetrable wilderness of blind gloom, it is night. The hour is midnight, and a very dark midnight. Even outside the woodland, it is dark and nothing can be seen. Within the forest, the piles of gloom are like the darkness in the womb of earth itself. Bird and beast are utterly and motionlessly still. What hundreds of thousands, what millions of birds, beasts, insects, flying things have their dwelling within that forest, but not one is giving forth a sound. Rather, the darkness is within the imagination, but inconceivable is that noiseless stillness of the ever murmurous, ever noise-filled earth. In that limitless empty forest, in the solid darkness of that midnight, in that unimaginable silence, there was a sound. Shall the desire of my heart ever be fulfilled? After the sound, the forest reaches sank again into stillness. Who would have said then that a human sound had been heard in those wilds? A little while after, the sound came again. Again the voice of man rang forth, troubling the hush. Shall the desire of my heart ever be fulfilled? 3 times the wide sea of darkness was thus shaken. Then the answer came, what is the stake put down? The first voice replied, I have staked my life and all its riches. The echo answered, life, it is a small thing which all can sacrifice. What else is there? What more can I give? This was the answer, thy soul's worship. Unquote. If you read this prologue in its original, you reach a particularly shivering end by the time the word bhakti is pronounced. And you will see, as I was saying, that this foreboding darkness, this stillness of the forest, of the deepest part of the forest, is very central to the concepts that are given forth, that are set forth by Bankim in Anandamath, as well as those that actually Sri Aurobindo has borrowed from Anandamath to write down the pamphlet Bhavani Mandir, which was mentioned in the Rowlatt Committee report. You see, it is a night of Amavasya, okay, when there is no moon in the sky, and it is midnight. What is the setting significant for? It is exactly in an Amavasya, in a night where there is no moon, and that too, on top of that, the midnight hour, which is selected for the worship of goddess Kali. So for Kali Puja, we use the Amavasya night, and the midnight hour is said to be a very good time for the worship of Kali. And we see that indeed Mother Kali is used as the symbol, the representation of India or Bharat Mata at a time when it was ravaged by foreign rule in Anandamath. You will see in Anandamath, there are 3 stages in which the mother has been described. The first is Ma Ja Chilen, or what mother has been. Okay, what the mother has been. In this, the representation of the mother is that of Jagadhatri, which is a form of Durga or Kali or Shakti, where the mother is seen to be seated on a lion, and under her feet, we see that the Mahisha and the elephant, which are representative of the vices of human beings, are trampled. This is what mother has been. Then the second phase or second representation of the mother is what mother is presently, or what mother has become. Ma Ja Hoiya Chen. And that representation is given as Mother Kali. So she has no robes on her body, she has no clothes, and she is standing on a dead body, okay, the Shava, which is the Shiva, and this mother dwells in the Shmashana, in the cremation grounds. So the entire country has become basically a cremation ground, and the Adhishthatri Devi, the goddess who presides over such kind of a place, such kind of a scenario, such kind of a country, is no one but Mother Kali. And finally, the third representation of the mother, Mother India and Shakti, that has been given by Bankim in Anandamath, is Durga. He describes her as Ma Ja Huiben, what mother will become in the future. So the foreboding scene in the prologue that we just read out is to give this instinctive appeal to the reader's mind that now we are going to encounter the mother in her representation as Kali, where she has been ravaged by foreign rule, by barbarians, by all sorts of looters and dacoits, and there she is present with her khadga in hand, and she is going to just slaughter the demons, all the enemies of her children. So this is why I think it is very significant that such a prologue has been inserted at the very beginning of Anandamath.
Read it so many times, Anandamath. but with your descriptions, I'm going to read it again. It'll be another kind of understanding of the book. Thank you very much for that. I have like many questions. One is Maja Hoiben. Has that happened after independence?
It is very difficult to speculate on what Bankim would have felt, but why don't we start with what you feel? What do you think? Have we attained the stage where Maja Hoiben, or what mother will become, the Dashapraharna Dharini Ma Durga? Has our motherland become that?
I think in recent times there has been a slight movement towards that, but I do not know whether it will continue or not. And for that, the political system is mostly responsible, but also people of the nation are responsible. And like your Rishi Hood University and all are doing, Indian knowledge systems will play a very major role in that.
So Bankim talks about the three representations of Bharat Mata, what mother has been, what mother presently is, in the setting in which he is situating his novel, which is 1760s, and what mother would become. And this question from Ninaji was pertaining to what mother would become, whether we have actually attained or fulfilled that sort of a future. So as the indications from her own admissions were pointing out, that we are far from reaching that sort of a stage where we have attained the optimum fulfillment of our country's development in all respects. Development, I'm using the term development here in a very wide sense, and I'm not talking about merely socio-political or economic development, but rather the moral and especially spiritual, cultural development of the country. And despite all things that we have achieved in the last 75 years, it's actually a very fitting time to reflect back on what we have achieved since our independence in 1947 and bring back Ananda Moth into the discourse. I feel that Bankim has provided a very important lens for us to look at the goals, the ideals that we can achieve, that we should have achieved in the 75 years of our existence as an independent country. And we have failed to do that in all respects, and especially the most important respects of recovering our own self, recovering our own agency in understanding our past, in understanding ourselves. We have not been able to establish Swaraj in all realms. We definitely have established Swaraj in the political realm, although some of our friends may raise a question whether that Swaraj is Swaraj in the best sense of the term, because there might be some critiques, some valid critiques, in fact, of the Constitution, whether parts of the Constitution are nothing but a continuation of the legacy of the British administration, because we know that it was indeed the Government of India Act 1935 which resulted in the development of the Constituent Assembly, which ultimately drafted the Constitution. So there can be a critique of that sort, but I'm not going into that. I'm just echoing some of the apprehensions, some of the questions that can come to many of our minds as to whether we have attained Swaraj in the right sense of the term, in the perfect sense of the term, in not just political domain, but also in the cultural and most importantly, the intellectual domain. So irrespective of the kind of Swaraj that we have attained for ourselves, we are ruled by Indians, there is no doubt by that. But whether the thought processes, the intellectual universe, the conceptual universe of ourselves, when I talk about Indians, I'm talking about myself, of ourselves practically, whether our thoughts are decolonized, whether we have attained Swaraj in ideas, as K.C. Bhattacharya, a famous 20th century philosopher, would have put it. That is a big question. And in fact, it is interesting to remember what Bankim Chandra has made the Guru explain to his Shishya in Dharma Tattva here in this regard, where he is using certain English terms and even Bangla words such as vritti. So the Bangla word vritti, as I have pointed out, is quite different from the way it is used in Sanskrit texts like Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha. The use of the term vritti is completely different from, if not completely, but quite different from the way it is used in the Sanskrit darshanika, philosophical parlance. And the reason that has been cited by the character of Guru in Dharma Tattva in this regard is that the educated class, by which he means, and he clearly mentions this, he means those who are educated in the British university system. In fact, Bunkim himself was a product of the British education system. He was one of the first graduates of the University of Calcutta. University of Calcutta, University of Madras, and University of Bombay. These are the three universities that had been established around the same time, around 1857, 1858, by the British. And Bunkim was among the first batch of graduates. So he knows this particular class that he's talking about, that he's commenting upon. And he says that they are not to be blamed for different usages of the conceptual frameworks from their own language. By that he means Sanskrit, which is being used in Bangla with twists and turns of its own, with peculiarities of its own. And he says that it is a natural outcome of the education system through which this particular educated class has gone through, which is what has made them use these terms with a pinch of salt. And therefore, one has to be very, very careful in dealing with these terms. And when English words are being used, sometimes the Shishya character raises an objection. He says that you are using ideas of the French philosopher, sociologist Auguste Comte, and you are using the ideas of Spinoza and Herbert Spencer. To this, Bunkim has a very interesting reply, which he makes through his character Guru. He says that just because some of the ideas of Hinduani, which is basically the word that he uses for Hindu Dharma or even Hindutva, just because some of the concepts of Comte or Spinoza or Herbert Spencer match with certain concepts and ideas of Hindutva or Hindu religion, we cannot simply discard them. Rather, I would describe people like Spencer and Spinoza as European Hindus who have come very close to the ideals of Hindutva, who have come very close to the ideals of Vedanta, to be more specific, especially in Spinoza's work. He mentions this while they were discussing Spinoza's work in Dharma Tattva. He mentions that we can regard Spinoza as a European Vedanti. So just because it has been matching with the works of Comte or Spinoza, we cannot discard Vedanta. That would be foolish. Rather, we should strive towards translating the ideas and concepts of European philosophers, non-Indian philosophers and thinkers as they match with our ideals and ideas. This is something that K.C. Bhattacharya also says, the philosopher who I have referred to. KCB says that our goal to attain Swaraj in ideas is to assimilate, is to translate the ideas and ideals of foreign thinkers into our ideas and ideals. So basically it is a task of assimilating and not of exclusion, which is what sets apart the works of philosophers like K.C. Bhattacharya or the works of Bunkim in Dharma Tattva especially. So we haven't attained Ma Durga's ultimate fulfillment, the representation of ultimate fulfillment, which we can attain only if we go by, not only, but I would say Bunkim has laid down an ethic through his Anushilan Tattva in Dharma Tattva. If we follow the ethical injunctions of Bunkim, I think it is rationalistic and it is very logically laid out. It is explained meticulously through objections and the resolution of objections, validated against doubts and adversarial thought, and therefore the anushilan or the cultivation of human faculties, their gradual development and their ultimate fulfillment in a manner that all human faculties are in a perfect balance. So, to give an example of this perfect balance, one question that has been asked by the Shishya, the disciple in Dharma Tattva to his guru, is that the faculty of desire, kama, is one of the human faculties. So, if the guru is saying that all the human faculties should be developed to their ultimate fulfillment, then wouldn't it be a perversion of human ideals to give kama or desire a free run? To explain this, basically the fourth or the third tenet, the proposition among the 7 propositions that I have listed out, has been given by Bonkim in Anushilan Tattva. He says that it is, while it is important to develop gradually each of the human faculties to find their ultimate fulfillment, it is also important to see that no one faculty clashes with the growth of other faculties. And that is what he means by the perfect balance that has to be attained, the harmony that has to be attained by human beings who are undergoing anushilan, who are undergoing cultivation of their faculties. So this is what Bonkim achieves in a very rational and dialogical way.
Anand Math had a major impact on the freedom struggle. They say that it was a political allegory, in fact. It sounds very spiritual and inward oriented and for ethics and all. But could you comment on it being a political allegory? You have mentioned that basically Ma that he mentions is representative of Mother India. But anything else? How come it had such a huge impact, being an adhyatmic or a spiritual novel?
I actually tried to respond to this sort of an question. I anticipated it and tried to respond to it by showing the link between Anushilan Tattva as it has been expounded in Bonkim's Dharma Tattva and his creative work, his novel Anandamot, by establishing a link of bhakti. Why bhakti is so crucial, as the prologue of Anandamot declares it. And that question can actually be answered by going into the details of Anushilan Tattva. You see, in Anushilan Tattva, the 7 main propositions that I described in my lecture, the final one, or rather the 5th and the 6th, including the final one, they clearly tell us that it is a kind of all-embracing love, which when it is oriented towards God, when it is oriented Godwards, towards Ishvara, it attains its fulfillment. Okay, and that has been described as bhakti, and that is the highest dharma. Now, among all these kinds of love for oneself, love of one's kith and kin, friends, family, love of animals, showing mercy on lesser beings, etc., etc., the ultimate one, the supreme kind of love, as has been asserted by Bonkim in Anushilan Tattva or Dharma Tattva, is love for one's own country. So Swadesh Prem, he says that considering the human condition, Manushya Avastha Viveshana Kuriya, we can say he makes his character of Guru say it to the Shishya that it is Swadesh Priti, or love of one's country, that is the supreme kind of love that human beings can exercise. So this is also a kind of instinctively understandable position, because we have seen that people can die for one's country, and it is if you try to understand that instinct, we can see that it is the protection of what one values, one's family, one's immediate society, and one's heritage, one inheritance that one has gathered from their ancestors, are all valuable things. And it is to preserve, to protect such valuable inheritance, as well as the ones that are closest to oneself. It is a kind of expansion of the self-love, the love for oneself, that grows into love of family, and then grows into the love of the nation, love of one's country. And I think that's why Bonkim says that, or rather, the character of Guru, through that character, Bonkim says that love of one's country is the highest kind of love that human beings can express at any given condition. Having said that, one can also see that Bonkim has actually laid down an ethic, a path to be followed by those who are on this journey to become, perfect human beings, so to speak, with the ideal of Sri Krishna, of course, because in Krishna Charitra, actually in the introduction to Krishna Charitra, which was a text written after Dharma Tattva, Bonkim refers back to his Dharma Tattva and quotes subsequently, he quotes copiously from Dharma Tattva and establishes that no character from the Itihasa Purana of India can be taken as the ideal in the way that Sri Krishna can be. He says that we can take the examples of Shakya Singha, which is Bhagavan Buddha, but he says that he is only Kopindhari Dharmavetta, which is to say that he is somebody who's wearing the ochre robes, the saffron robes, and he's preaching religion. He's founding a religion and expounding on that. He, of course, has the best for human beings and all other beings in his heart, but he cannot be taken to be the highest ideal because there is a class above him, or his class of beings, which are represented through the rishis. And there he actually talks about the various kinds of rishis: Rajarshis, Devarshis, Brahmarshis. And among the Rajarshis, especially, he talks about people like Janaka and Sri Ramachandra and Bhishma, Lakshmana, Yudhishthira, and so on and so forth. His point is that these are kings as well as philosophers. At the same time, they are sitting on the Simhasana, they are sitting on the throne, they are at the helm of affairs of a country, but they are also detached in their heart. An ideal of Karma Yoga, which has been expounded in Srimad Bhagavad Gita by Sri Krishna. But even among these Rajarshis, he says that Sri Krishna is a class apart in himself, because we see that Yudhishthira becomes a Shishya of Sri Krishna. Arjuna becomes a Shishya of Sri Krishna. Bhishma worships Sri Krishna at various junctures. We have seen that just before the killing of Shishupala, Bhishma was worshipping Sri Krishna. We also see that in the Shanti Parva, when Yudhishthira is confused, he's actually breaking down, seeing the end of his family. Even after getting the power of Hastinapur, he says that I am not satisfied with this outcome of the war, and I want to take up sannyasa. I want to go back to the forest. I want to relegate everything to my brothers, and I want to go and find peace, because this is not what I had wanted. So there we see a crisis. The king who is fittest to rule is desirous of becoming a sannyasi. So therefore, Yudhishthira, despite all his qualities of being detached while sitting on the throne, is not the highest ideal. Arjuna is neither the ideal. Bhishma is neither the ideal. The ideal is only and only Sri Krishna, because at the same time, he is the teacher of all these great Kshatriyas, the Rajarshis, the kings come philosophers, as Plato would call them, and he is perfectly detached from all sorts of hankering after power. And at the same time, he has cultivated all the human faculties within himself. And Bonkim actually explains this in great detail in his Krishna Charitra, that Jnanarjan, Karyakarini, Chittaranjani, Shaririki, all these vrittis, all these faculties have been cultivated, developed, and found fulfillment in Sri Krishna alone. He talks about how Sri Krishna had, right from his childhood, developed his Shaririki vritti or shaririki faculty, the bodily faculty, when he talks about how, as a young kid, in fact, in his teens, he was able to beat the greatest warriors in the court of Kamsa. And Kamsa himself was, in fact, beaten in a fist fight in a Malla Yuddha with Sri Krishna. So that is shown by Bankim Chandra as the cultivation and the final fulfillment of the Shaririki faculty. He goes on to cite such examples for each of the faculties that he has listed down as the principal ones for the fulfillment of Anushilan or cultivation. Yes.
My question was more about its political leanings and how it was a political commentary. How did it influence?
It is. Yeah, it is a political commentary because it is set in a very specific historical political setting, which I have mentioned at the beginning of my lecture. So you will see that the novel Anandamot is opening in the late years of 1760s, when Chiattore Monnantor, the great famine of the Bengali year 1176, or the Gregorian calendar years 1769, 1770 have taken place. And it is a time when that sort of a political, economic, and even moral ravaging of the Indian society, of the Indian psyche, and especially in Bengal, that has taken place. It is the time when the Mughal rule is in its decline, and the Nawabs of Bengal, who were erstwhile governors of the Mughal emperor in Bengal, have achieved autonomy, and they are misusing that power. There is no order in the country, and they are also religious fanatics, and they just go and pick up the cattle, the woman folk, and so on and so forth. All sorts of mischiefs are done. On top of that, the British East India Company has attained the Diwani, or the tax collecting rights. So it is a dual problem for especially the dwellers of the Bengal province of that time, 1760s, late 1760s. And this results in a great famine, which, there are different estimates, but one estimate that has been mentioned by D.N. Lorenzen, who I referred to in my lecture, says that approximately 10 million people had died. 1/3 of the then Bengal's population had been wiped out in this famine. So you can imagine the kind of moral as well as economic, political repercussions that would have taken place. And in fact, the Sannyasi rebellion is a direct outcome of this sort of mismanagement of resources and political affairs, economic affairs of Bengal in particular. So it finds its resources, the novel finds its resources in a very politically charged scenario, and thus it inspires a band of young Bengali revolutionary nationalists to create samitis, to create associations, organizations which are modeled after the organization that we get to see in Anandamot, which is named Anandamot. Okay, it is a mutt, it is a religious quarter where a band of sannyasis who have given up their family are organizing themselves, training themselves in order to rebel against the dual forces of the British East India Company as well as the Muslim Nawab of Bengal. So this is the political underpinnings of the novel.
It's pretty good. You have quite elaborately said. My basic question is, we have a very long preaching about Dharma Tattva, and Bankim Chandra has given the practice faculties, means you can say the Anushilan Tattva, how we can reach the ultimate. So my basic question is why we have failed to achieve, at least after the independence. That partly you answered because of our education system and all these things. But how can you further go ahead? How can you revive the thing? How can you formulate something so that we can go ahead implementing this thing?
Thank you, Shopun Babu, for your question. So, one of the ways through which we can achieve this is to bring back into discourse texts like Dharma Tattva, texts like Ananda Math, texts like Krishna Charitra, even, and discuss their contents more and more to the younger generations who might be quite unaware of the existence of these concepts as explained by Bunkim in these works, and to go on provoking thought, provoking questions, doubts in the minds of those, especially the thought leaders and the policymakers of this country and even of the world, to to make them think about what are the failures, what are the fundamental flaws that have resulted in the failures of attaining the ultimate fulfillment and perfect balance of the cultivated faculties of human beings in this country and even abroad. So, one of the things that I believe is very, very crucial in attaining that is to bring back into discourse and discuss more and more the works of people like Bunkim, which we have been trying to do. If you see, this can be regarded as a reinitiating of that discourse, which many others have done. I am told by Aparna ji at the beginning of this talk that Raghav Sharan Sharma ji, if I'm not mistaken, has also given a talk on Anushilan, the concept of Anushilan in Hindi, and I'm very much looking forward to listen to that talk. And another important aspect of translating this into a reality is to bring these texts, bring these discourses into mainstream education as well. So this is something that we have been trying to do in our university especially. We have programs both at the PG and UG levels where we have kept works of Bunkim as course material. So we are actually going to offer an MA program in liberal education and research from the next academic year onwards, which will primarily focus on research and preparing researchers in humanities and social sciences disciplines. A discourse of humanities and social sciences disciplines are currently not very satisfactory, as I would say, and we are trying to pump into it the right texts, the right concepts that we need for our generation, that we need for future generations, in fact. I think the Sannyasi Rebellion is a topic that deserves a discussion on its own. For now, I can direct you to the works of R.C. Majumdar and D.N. Lorenzen, who have written some material on Sannyasi Rebellion, and especially on the participation of the sannyasis, the Hindu sannyasis who used to come from akhadas, mostly located in Uttar Pradesh, in current Uttar Pradesh, and their associations with the mutts and akhadas in Bengal. By Bengal, I do not mean only the present state of West Bengal, but the entire province of Bengal, entire province of Bengal as it existed, as it was constituted in the British era, constituting of the East Pakistan or Bangladesh of present day, and even certain districts of Assam, Tripura, and Bengal.
Okay.
Yes.
My question is, you said that we are planning to incorporate this thing in the education system, and we means is there any institution or
yes, sir,
something like that?
Yes, sir. So primarily in the university where I currently teach, namely Rishi Hood University, and even within the university there is Ashram School of Public Leadership, which is a constituent school of the university, where we are going to offer PG and UG level programs. We already are running a PGD program, but we are going to offer this in a much more systematic and fuller manner in the upcoming programs of our school and of our university, especially focusing on the humanities and social sciences research at the MA PG level.